So this is a mini lesson on ethical research and what it means to be ethical as you go about the research project. So the SACE Board Ethical Conduct of Research Policy says that students and teachers must take responsibility to ensure that the research topic and the research methodology adopted do not compromise the principles of honest and ethical research. So conducting ethical research is an essential learning skill that's promoted by SACE, and it's the responsibility of me as your teacher and you as the student of the research project to make sure that you are conducting all of your research in an ethical way. So this lesson is going to talk about what that means. What does it mean to be ethical as you go about the research project? So basically, there are two main considerations when you're conducting ethical research. You need to have integrity and you need to be honest. And you need to respect other people that are involved in your research. So every person that's involved in your research activities needs to be protected from harm. That means both you as the researcher and any other people that are involved in your research process along the way. So let's explore a little bit about what ethical research means. I've gone into Evernote. I'm in the initial planning and refining folder of your folio, and in the note called templates, exemplars and resources. So at this stage of the research project, you've created a Lotus diagram for your particular research topic. You've completed your planning sheet where you decided on a question, you broke it down into subtopics, and you planned appropriate primary and secondary research that you think you will do to help you answer your question. And you've explored the capability document and you've chosen 2 capabilities that you think you will develop throughout the research project, and you've filled out the table in the capability document with about 4 or 5 different dot points broken down, and you've decided the ways that you can imagine that you might develop these 2 capabilities. So now it's time to think about how you're going to get ethical as you carry out the primary and secondary research that you've planned. All right, so you'll see other resources in this Evernote are a task sheet for the proposal, a PDF, ethical research in the research project, which we're going to have a look at, and some exemplars as well, which are examples of the documents that you're trying to create. So before we open up the template for your ethical considerations, we're going to scroll down past the task sheet for the proposal, and we're going to have a look at this PDF, which goes for 3 pages, ethical research in the research project. So remember, we open a PDF by just clicking on the little Adobe PDF symbol. Excellent. All right, so I might make that a little bit smaller. All right, I'm going to scroll down past page 1 and have a look at page 3. So these are the ethical guidelines for students. Research project isn't the only subject that you may carry out research, but it is obviously, as called the research project, you're definitely going to be carrying out some research in this subject. So you have to make sure you're honest and ethical, and so see, these are some of the guidelines that you have to follow. Okay, it really is quite common sense. You just have to do the right thing by all of the people who are involved in your research. So if you're conducting an interview or a survey, you'll need to make sure that you're sensitive to the people who you're interviewing a survey. You're not going to ask inappropriate questions. You're not going to phrase your questions in such a way as that they might offend or upset somebody of a particular age, gender, cultural background. You also, before you even conduct an interview or a survey, you need to make sure that the people who are going to be completing that survey or interview know why you want to do it and what you're going to do with the information that they give you, how you're going to use it in your folio and in your outcome, who's going to see that information. Are you going to protect this person's identity by allowing them to be confidential? Okay, so whenever you're researching and it's involving you talking to or getting the opinions or from another person as such, you need to make sure that you're sensitive, that you don't take up too much of their time, that you don't ask things that are inappropriate, that you give them the right to be confidential, that you don't pressure them to be involved in your research project, that you don't make them answer questions that might make them feel uncomfortable. So it's just using your common sense there. Okay, so in another kind of realm of the research project, you'll also be using other people's information. You'll be using things that other people have put up on the internet or in documentaries, in YouTube clips, and so it is ethical not to plagiarize another person's work. It's ethical not to pretend that somebody else's work is your own. So you need to acknowledge your sources. You need to get permission to use particular images. If you're using images or music within your outcome, you need to make sure you acknowledge that when you're quoting somebody else or when you're using somebody else's ideas or another person's source, that you make sure that you reference that appropriately. All right, let's scroll up and have a look at this beautiful diagram, because this is the main diagram that I feel that you'll be able to use as you go about your research project. So you might want to print this page off so that you can write on it, but basically as you're completing your ethical table about how the proposed research processes that you've planned are indeed ethical, you should read all of the things on this table and have a look at which element does it refer to. So up here we've got acknowledging sources, avoiding plagiarising, respecting copyright, not fabricating or falsifying information, so don't make up your interview, or if your survey results aren't exactly as good as what you hoped, don't blag them and change the results. So this is all to do with your internet research, I guess, and your survey results. So, you know, have integrity there, be honest. When it's not your own work, acknowledge that it's not your own work. Okay, and then all of these other dot points kind of relate to when you're working with a particular person or group of people within the research project. So, you know, make sure that everybody understands why it is that you are wanting to talk to them for the research project. You know, what questions might you be asking? What are you going to do with their responses so that they have the option of whether or not they even want to be involved. You need to get permission from people to use, you know, to quote them in your research project. Find out if they want to remain anonymous or whether or not you can actually use their name. You need to make sure that you treat them with respect, that you don't ask sensitive questions, that you don't push them to respond to things, you know, that they might not want to respond to. Okay, and if they want to stop the interview or they don't really want to keep going with your survey, then they're allowed to withdraw at any time without you pressuring them to keep going. Another way to be ethical is not to absolutely overburden a particular person. So if someone's giving you some great information, if you've got a family friend that's a counsellor and your research project topic is to do with some kind of mental illness, you can't be harassing this person and overburdening them. Remember that professionals are actual professionals. They have a job, they have busy lives, and so you need to respect that and make sure that when you do ask them questions or you do conduct some kind of interview, that you're doing so at a time that's appropriate and convenient for them, and you're not expecting that they give you too much of their time. Okay? So I think this document quite clearly outlines what it means to be ethical in the research project. So once you've had a look at that document, you've got that open, you'll be able to complete the ethical consideration for proposed research processes. So let's open that document together and see what that involves. Okay, so in this document there's a table that you're going to need to complete and fill out so that you can show that you've identified all of the ethical considerations for each of the research processes that you've planned. So you will have watched the video that I'm making now, you will have a look at that PDF, the ethical research in the research project, and you'll also need your planning sheet, because you're going to be copying and pasting from your planning sheet all of the research processes that you said that you would choose. So if you have an interview and you were going to do a survey and you were going to do some kind of observation visit as your 3 primary research processes, you will copy that straight out of your planning sheet. Okay, we don't want the details about what you're going to do at your interview or your survey or your observation visit that were in the planning sheet. Now you need to think about, when I conduct this interview, how am I going to be ethical? Okay, so that's where you need to just make some notes here. It can be dot points. You can look back at the PDF. You need to talk about how you think you're going to be ethical during your interview. What are some of the ethical considerations that relate specifically to your interview? When you come down here to your secondary research, you'll probably have internet. You'll all be using internet websites. You might have some YouTube documentaries. And you might have a documentary, let's say. So, for a lot of the secondary research you do, the ethical considerations will be the same. So you don't need to repeat yourself 3 times and say in 3 different ways how you're going to be ethical when it's kind of the same thing. So you might want to highlight all of those cells, and you go into layout, merge cells, and just make one box where you can type all of your ethical considerations to do with your secondary research. So that's stuff like acknowledging copyright, avoiding plagiarism, making sure that if you quote somebody, you are acknowledging the source, so you have a reference list, you'll use in-text referencing, that kind of thing. All right, once you've completed this table, you need to delete the example that I've given you at the top there, delete all of the information, the guidelines, so that you've just got the table on your Word document, and then you need to save that. So now if you're still a little bit confused, we can go back into Evernote. Remember, at the end of this templates and exemplars and resources Evernote, we've got not just the ethical research document, but we've also got an exemplar, a PDF that shows you all of the documents that you are meant to be creating in this first couple of weeks of the research project. So you'll see that the second page is the 20 questions, the third page is the Lotus diagram, fourth page and fifth page are examples of planning sheets, and the sixth page is a capability, seventh is the ethical considerations in the research project. So your table will look something like this, okay? You need to talk about all of the different research processes that you're going to use, and you need to show that you understand what ethical research is and you know how you're going to be ethical as you go about carrying out all of these things. This is important for planning and ethical understanding. It is a skill development, so it actually applies to a lot of the different performance standards for the FOLIO. All right. I think that is enough.